Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Looking Deeper with Sandra Herrick and Denise Iwana Francisco. Hey, Sandy.
Hey, Dana, how you doing?
Good. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary.
10 years we've been at this.
Well, this life.
This life. Exactly.
Okay, so wait a second. I don't want to disappoint any of my fans. Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary, Sandy.
Oh, God, Dana.
Hard to believe.
Well, it's not really, but it is. And, when I'm thinking about it and really feeling that energy of what it means to be so available at a level that you're willing to just be available, I can't believe 10 years have gone by of great service and great, I have to say this in that way, of just the willingness to participate. Be a part of the participation. It's how much has happened, how many different venues, how many different aspects, how many different avenues and connections, and hundreds of thousands of people that we don't even know because they're invisible. So thank you. 10 years and counting.
Yes, and a great big thank you to Savannah Arienta, because that's where it all started on Soul's Journey Radio.
Absolutely.
All of those years ago. And so, Savannah, if you happen to be watching, thank you. Look what you started, you troublemaker, you.
Oh, right. And I have to thank Carmen Kerrigan, because I was at Burdick's having dinner with her, and she goes, oh, there's this, blah, blah, ooh, la, la. So really? And I got very ambitious, like, well, I can do that. And so I did.
And so you did, and here we are.
And I want to just say, the first time that I saw you obviously was not live, but in that photograph of you with your perfect little page boy hairdo and the twinkly stars and the green and the blue eyes. And it was one of those things where all of a sudden it was like, out of all the different pictures, you and, of course, Maggie Angel.
Oh, yeah.
It was like, all of a sudden it was like, well, now wait a second, there's somebody. There's somebody. Little did I know who that somebody was going to be.
Exactly. What a beautiful ride it's been, Sandy. Thank you.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. Here's to you and to the next 100,000 years.
And here's to you. To you.
Right. So a deeper look. Oh, my God. Our next venue.
Looking deeper. And, you and I, we talk quite often, actually, and recently more often. And we were talking about, so how did we want to initiate our 10th year together? And we decided on changing things up a little bit from On the Road to Heaven to Looking Deeper. And we had great, good discussion about that. Sandy, would you share with everyone who's watching why we're going to the new format and the new name?
Well, because next is next, and the magnetic energy that pulled us here is so honest in that this is not about if I'm good or bad, am I going to get to heaven? This is about looking deeper into that space of who am I, where have I been, where am I going, and how have I gotten here?
Yes.
How do I take responsibility for who I am? This is not about I hope I get to where I want to go. This is, I hope I'm who I am when I'm at the place of where I am, so that I'm real in the moment, so that I can see what it takes to get me here. And I think in this beauty of the reality of what's happening in our society this is not about I hope I become a good person and am accepted. It's who am I now? And how have I made myself so that I accept and tolerate and be myself?
Yeah.
And stay honest with it. And face the honesty of it with all the consequences, all the storylines, and show up in our lives.
Exactly. Showing up. And how do we become? This whole life process is a process of becoming. And how do we become? And what are those pieces? And what are the transitions and the transformations and the initiations and the high highs and the low lows? How do we become?
Yeah.
And how do we continue to become?
Yeah. If we always stayed in kindergarten, we'd still be in school and we'd be with a lot of great people. But the wisdom of who we are and the smashing of life, and I say this with the dignity of what it means to smash life. You
Mhm.
know, if you cook an egg and you don't smash it, you won't eat it
Right.
without the shell.
Right.
And so there's that beauty of progress, growth, change, transformation, the depth. I mean, it's like if you, this is the, for whatever reason, this is the vision I just had. If you're going to pour sauce on a pile of spaghetti, if you don't dig in and lift it up and allow it to be completely stirred, you're going to have a lot of sauce and a little spaghetti. But if you really dig in and allow it to like get in
Manja.
there,
Yes. Yeah.
then you have the mix of a great essence and a great flavor and a great opportunity to really eat life.
Yes.
To really eat life. And if there's anything I know about me is I enjoy eating and I love enjoying the food of life.
You do.
I do.
You do.
I do. The good, bad, the ugly. It's all like, So
Very
I want to
good.
take a moment just in case Yvette is found her way here. I was just online with Yvette Moore, who, and I don't know if that's your last name now, sweetheart, but talk about years. I met Yvette in Bozeman, Montana,
Wow.
way back, and she is one of these soulful people that you find your life and you meet again, and then you live your life and you leave again, and then you find your life and recreate again. And within moments just before the show, you can feel the shivers. She and I found each other again right in the nick of time.
Love
So
that.
that, welcome to a deeper look and welcome back home, my love. You are profoundly connected to me, and she'll never be too far away. And she's sitting on the other side of the world in Australia, 12 hours difference. So with what we have today, we're always the same way that we are in loving each other. So welcome to our show.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Sandy, as we have done for 10 years now, would you please bring us all together to center? Tonight we're talking about becoming me. Who are we once they're gone? And tonight we're going to talk about who we are upon the death of our parents. That's a deep subject, an emotional subject, and you do such a beautiful job of bringing us to center.
Okay, so everybody, let's take a deep breath, a gentle breath. Close your eyes. And first of all, thank you. Thank you for finding us. Thank you for being a part of us, and thanking us for being a part of you. Deep breath, let's go in. I dedicate tonight to the healing light, to the light of the massive love that unifies all, that seeks the conception of the self, the perception of being parented, born, birthed, the dignity of be giving a graceful life, a life to be graced with. And tonight we look at the path and the journey of what does it truly mean to be conceived, received, and initiated into our lives. To be granted life, offered life, and then to claim the life that is ours, even from the very people that gave us birth. Take a gentle breath and know that the inertia of life is constant. The populace of life is abundant. And the perception of life is slippery. always in transition, always allowed to change, always allowed to grow. Deep breath. And welcome to our show, A Deeper Look. Or Looking Deeper. What's the name of our show?
Looking Deeper.
There you go.
Sandy, you know, there you have it. Sandy, when we were discussing where we wanted to begin to inaugurate the 10th year, you said, let's talk about who we become after our parents pass on. Why did you choose that?
Well, because it's the anniversary, the 1-year anniversary of my mother's passing, literally. And because on the 27th, Saturday, it is my mother's and my father's anniversary. They got married in 1945. And I will be standing at a huge gathering of individuals for a kickoff of a new foundation called Cooper's Crossing. And it is to honor the opportunity to heal trauma. It will become a trauma center. And there's that beauty and sorrow, Dana, of being able to stand at a podium and to speak to 150, 200 people about the trauma of our lives because of the people we've been born to and born into. And that the trauma of being born to these people, my parents, into the family of my family of origin, and the experiences that I've had, and from the peripheral experience of why do I have PTSD? Why does anybody have PTSD? And what is the ability we can talk about it now? There's nobody in my life I need to protect, and everybody in my life or my history that I can honor. So who I am after my parents have passed away is the total sum of my experience of being their child and my experience of responding to them in a way that makes me an individual without owing them their idea of me. And not being ashamed of my life, but to respect that if I didn't have this life, I would have nothing to say at this huge opening of a trauma center. So who I am is an accumulation of, I'll be blunt, tragedies and monumental, joyous memories. And I can't say I regret. I'm sad that some have happened. I'm saddened because some have happened. But I am grateful for who I am. And without them, I'm free to be who I am, why I am, without the fear of being judged by them.
And that's an honest answer.
Thank you.
That's a beautifully honest answer. A lot of times when you and I'll speak for myself, when I'm sitting with a client whose parent has recently passed, the feelings can vacillate between, I'm so glad the old biddy finally kicked the bucket because I was ready to choke the life out of her as it was, and that's being honest without judgment when somebody says that. And on the other end of the spectrum, I hear, I don't know what I'm going to do tomorrow. She was my best friend. We spoke to each other 3 times a day. We were attached at the hip, and I feel as though half of me is gone. How do I recover from that, Dana? When we talk to somebody who says, I'm so glad the old biddy finally kicked the can, because I was ready to kick it for her. Understanding that not everybody's home life is My Three Sons or the Donna Reed Show. First and foremost, it can be alarming for people. Well, what do you mean your parents weren't perfect? What do you mean you were happy that a parent died? How can you possibly feel glad that your parents have gone? How can you feel that way? Well, that's being honest about feeling. And it's in my mind, it's honest about really taking a look at life in the household. But I love the way that you said that, there were painful times and then there were tremendously joyful times, and trying to balance and weigh those out really is, I believe, the beginning of who we become after our parents are gone, is to take a long look at, realistically looking at who that parent was, what the relationship was.
Breaking the glass of illusion is a courageous act. Coming out of denial is a quantum leap into the physics of your own psyche.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a necessity at some point in the assumption that, well, my parents are older, they should die before me. But not everybody dies in the sequence that we assume you're supposed to.
Right. Right.
And so I am, knock on wood, I am honored to say, and most of the people who have listened to us or me know that I was present for my father's death,
mm-hmm.
realizing that who I became in the moment of his dying was aware that I made a promise to him pre my birth to go through whatever we were going to go through, no matter how we went through it. I am getting goosebumps on my goosebumps. That in the moment that he and I would be the most diligent in not letting anyone interfere with our connection.
Mm-hmm.
Even my upbringing to hate him through my mother. I witnessed beyond life as sweet. Holding his face as he died, smelling the room of his release, and being present for his final breath and to see his eyes as he died. The pettiness of our humanity was eliminated. And everything in my world that I had built to gain, to accomplish, to have as a status, which was monumental. The success that I was sitting on was millions and millions of dollars. And a companionship in that space of, oh my God, Daddy, I'm successful. And it fell apart in his dying. Who I was to prove to him something, who I was because of him was something else. And then out of that collapse, I had to find who I am, not who I would hope to be accepted, or to prove to my mother and father that I was valid. I think that's really one of the issues for all children, to prove to their parents that they're valid.
Mm-hmm.
Agreed. How did you do with the Sarge? Because you lost your dad too.
Well, when the Sarge passed, I was in Ireland.
I remember the text.
Yep. And, the last time that my father and I spoke downstairs in the kitchen, it's one of those things that we all and recently I've had another conversation with someone else very similar. We can feel, I could feel in my last conversation with him that it would be the last conversation that I had.
Yeah.
And so in that conversation, I said each and everything that I felt I needed to say, that I wanted to say, to assure him of. And before I even went to Ireland, it was just before Father's Day, I wrote him a letter and put it in a Father's Day card. And Elise delivered it to him. She said, Mom, he was so crabby in the morning when we went to see him on Father's Day. And I handed him your Father's Day card and he opened it up and I read it to him, Mom. And she said, all of a sudden he was all smiles and he was happy and he was back to being grandpa. So while I wasn't there for the moment that he passed, his spirit was with me in Ireland, in Glendalough. And I woke up before I even received the phone call from my son, and my father was standing at my bedside. And he wasn't sure whether he should be in his physical body in that hospital bed or if he was free to be with me as he was appearing in spirit. And we had a conversation about that, he and I. And I assured him that he was free to be in spirit. And that's where he should be. And we had another conversation. And it was shortly thereafter that my son called me to tell me that Grandpa had passed. So always making sure, in fact, the last conversation that I had on the phone with him, the very last words that I spoke to him were, I love you. Thank you for everything that you've done for me. And he wasn't really able to respond at that time, but I could feel that he heard me. And I guess one of the gifts of being somebody who sees those who have crossed over, he and I have had good conversations since his crossing over. That's one of the blessings of this path that I walk. So making sure that I said what I needed to say, and also, frankly, discussing with him those times when I was really just quite frankly angry with him. And being honest about that. When people say to me that their life was a perfect childhood, I always pause for just a moment. And I do also happen to believe that we choose our parents, as you just said. And that during the course of life, we have the opportunity to become like them or to become the opposite of them, depending on what the situation happens to be. So my final words with my father were very, very loving. And that's a good feeling. I know that it isn't always that way for people. And it is a different feeling when your father has passed or your mother has passed, and you wonder to yourself, wow, who am I going to call now when I need, the down low on how to do this, that, or the other thing.
Right.
So it does become different. And when people say to me, or they probably say to you, well, it must be easier for you because you see spirit. You see them in their spirit body. So it must be really easy for you, Denise. And the fact of the matter is, no, it doesn't make it any easier because we miss the physicality, and the inner child does want to be able to pick up the phone and say, hey, Sarge, what do you think about this? Yeah. I think that time of reflection after our parents pass, honest reflection, is really, really healthy. Don't you, Sand?
It's so mandatory to be able to allow yourself grief of what it feels like to, I hear the echo, to know that, I'm going to say this in 3 different sections. The acute connection that my father and I have, and I say have because it's continuous, found me when I was in bed in New Mexico in a most astounding ranch that I co-owned. When I opened up my eyes, and it was so pitch dark in my room, but it was bright sunlight outside. And I closed my eyes instantly, and screamed inside, "Where am I?" And the voice said, "Inside your father's coffin."
Mm.
To the point where I woke up or just opened my eyes and called instantly to find out that he was delivered to the hospital that day.
Mm.
To then call him in the hospital, and he, in his exaggeration, sound so sick. And I was like, "Oh, it's my father." And then really talk to him. "Daddy, I'm here for you. What do you need?" "Oh, no, 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 no." With, "No, Dad, I'll come to you." And then break down and say, "Would you?" So I saw my father's coffin before I knew my father was dying.
Uh-huh.
So to get there and to know that what I had to prepare by going there was very much as you're saying, there would never be again that conversation to call.
Mm-hmm.
There would never again be that opportunity to lean on.
Mm.
That I was now putting myself in the position to lean on.
Yes.
And to not fear his loss, but to gear up for, I was going to make certain that he did not fear his passing.
Mm.
And to be able to be a part of that, our perfect childhood really was a perfect childhood in many, many ways, because he was always Santa Claus. He was always the Easter Bunny. He did things that shocked the shit out of me when he was good, and he did things that shocked the shit out of me when he was bad. But he never took his love away from me. Where my mother did take her love away from me. And that's one of those things, ooh, I can feel it, where I was so in love with my mother that I was able to align with her in actually rallying with her against my father. So the reason why I'm saying that is to everybody that's out there, when you're pivoted between your parents out of some survival code of and bond and karma, and this is that deeper look, that is that look into that depth of being able to know that my bond with my mother is as karmically rich and diversified as it is with my father, but it excludes their relationship at some point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we need to look when we go into this deep place of, is that I don't always have to look at my mother and my father as a team. I need to look at them as individuals and who I am with them in our team, not choose or be used by their issues with each other,
Mm-hmm.
so that I'm excluded from the love of either one of them.
Mm-hmm.
I have a client just recently that came and was talking so profoundly about the love of his mother, the love he knew he had because of the mother. And all of a sudden I went in and I said, well, let me be the devil's advocate here for the moment. I said, what if she used you as a pawn? Because his love with his mother gave him a relationship that denied him the love of the father.
Mm.
And I want people to be able to know that when we're talking about these issues, that we're talking about the issues of our contract with our parents as individuals to individuals, not just one child to two let's put it this way. The contract goes in a multi-dimensional umbrella. I'm the child of these two because I need two to be born. But my contract with my father is very different than my contract with my mother. And I didn't know that until after my father died. I did not know I was going to be devoured by my mother after my father died. And I devoted myself to my mother while my father was alive. These are the kind of things where we need to look at is like, who are we with our parents? Not just what were our parents to us. And that's taking the accountability of, wait a second, who am I with these people? Not just who am I suffering with them. Who am I with them? What do you feel about that?
Well, that's a really big question.
Yeah, let me take a look here.
And, for myself as an adopted person, I was having a conversation with our friend David Sturkin, who's also adopted.
Hi, David.
And he and I were talking after my dad passed, after the Sarge passed, and he said, actually, Dana, this isn't the first father that you've had to mourn.
Right.
You've mourned your birth father. You've mourned your foster father. You've mourned the first father that adopted you. And now you're mourning the second father that adopted you. You've mourned 4 fathers, the loss of 4 men in your life who were your father. And that really stopped me cold when he said that, because then, as you just said, I had to stop when I was alone later that evening and really think about my relationship to each one of those 4 men. The man who was my biological father, the man who was my foster father, who wrote a beautiful poem that I have framed here in the home, the man who adopted me first in Memphis, Tennessee, and, who got real about it and said, this just isn't working with her. We're going to find her another home. And ultimately to the Sarge. What are my relationships to all 4 of those men? What are my relationships to all of those women? Karmically.
Yes.
What is that? And out of all of that, how did I become who I am?
Right.
Because even in those memories that we don't remember as young children, the memories are stored in our bones, in our body, in our blood.
The imprints are phenomenal.
They are. And so taking a look at who we've become and how we've become, the best that I can do on any given day and to suggest to anyone is to give gratitude where gratitude is felt. Because without our parents, we wouldn't be who we are, without the help sometimes of therapists and healers and all of that kind of thing. But it also then makes me take a look at how I parent.
Right.
When my father was passing away, he said to my son, make sure you take care of your mother. Your mother is your responsibility, which is a Sargism because he was a career military man. So you take care of your mother. Well, when I caught wind of that from our little Elise, because you know how she is.
Mighty bitch. I'm sorry, but yes, you are.
She has to dish.
Love in the world.
Yeah, she has to dish it all and keep it real. And she told me that. Well, I picked up the phone and I had breakfast with my son. And I said, under no circumstances and under any conditions am I your responsibility.
Right.
In any way, shape, or form. Do you understand me? And he just looked at me. Did Lisi tell you? I said, yes, she did. And no, you are not responsible for me. So that deathbed agreement that you had is null and void. He wanted you to continue what he was doing on the earth plane. He is no longer here, honey. That was my relationship with my father. You are not my father.
Right.
And he looked at me and he said, Mom, that makes total sense.
Right.
That was my relationship with my father.
which gives you a different relationship with your son, which
Yes.
gives you a different relationship with the idea your son has.
Yes.
And again, who are we without these people? We're not their belief system.
Yes.
And it's important to not, I mean, I think this is one of those things where, well, I promised on their deathbed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what promise did you make and who wanted you to make it and who's it involved? Do they want you to keep it?
I see a lot of that in my practice, frankly.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Continuing the legacy, continuing on the traditions, continuing on, even if they're the Hank Williams Jr. family traditions, right? Taking on all of those traditions. Sometimes we feel as though that's who we're supposed to be when a parent passes on. Well, I'm going to continue with the hard drinking and the hard smoking because, by God, that's what the family does.
Right.
And sometimes for the first person to step out and say, yes, my family, my parents were drinkers, they were gamblers, whatever, all of the above. And I don't think I need to be that way. I get to just be me.
Right.
And sometimes there can be the vacillating between, Sandy, is it okay that I don't want to, get drunk and get loud like my family did? Is that okay? Or am I letting my parents down because that's who I don't want to become? How do you answer that?
Yes. There is this significant ideal of, I want to have the legacy of, or my blood has to carry on the familiar tradition of, and it has run in my family to the point where I ask them, can we be different than the horror in our family?
Mm-hmm.
And there's this moment in my life that I feel the older I get, the more my father I look like, the more I look like my mother. Now I'm starting to look like my grandmother. It's amazing. It doesn't matter. It's like, oh, here it comes. But I know that, and I think that this is very important. Our DNA is significant. And because you are an adoptee, you do not have the DNA of the people who brought you up.
Right.
And so you're not looking at your DNA. You're not finding the imprint of the mannerisms, the physicalities. My family, I am one of 7 children. We are stamped. Man alive, you look at us and there is like, God said, you're a Herrick, you're a Herrick, you're a Herrick, you're a Herrick. And there's no way, I went to school and somebody looked, you're a Herrick. I am. Oh my God, I am. You're a Richard Herrick's daughter. Oh, they know where I live. I wouldn't lie.
Yes.
And
yeah.
So there is that DNA, and I say this in reference to my nephew, and I want to say this in the honor of my nephew, Rusty, where his father died in his, 50-something years old, but his father left the home when Rusty was a child. And yet, when I see Rusty, he's so his father, but he takes his father because his DNA walks like him, looks like him, talks like him, but he made the choice not to take the ancestral DNA of destruction.
Wow.
And it was his wife who said, you have a family. Take a look at us and be the man for your family, not the legacy of your father.
That's big.
That was big. Where someone said,
that's big.
You can choose, but you don't get both. And so for someone to be able to take the beauty of their ancestry because of their bloodline and know that, my God, it looks like he was with him every single day of his life. I see that you're reading something here. What's going on in there?
Well, Carla, Joe, and Katie
Oh,
Battle are right in alignment with you about, recognition,
yeah.
familial, recognition. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But there is that choice where am I cursed because of my DNA, or do I have options because of it?
Mm-hmm.
Because my DNA is my DNA, but my intelligence is my intelligence. And at some point, I can choose to not just be my family of origin and use my family of origin as wisdom or my schooling, and then choose. I see these little blurbs here. I want to.
Yeah, you got to read what
Hey,
Barbie
Barbie.
wrote because you've met
My
Barbie's
father's
mom.
son, but I'm not my father. There you go. And that's exactly what my nephew really, truly knew. That he wanted to be him and he wanted to be loved by him, but not being loved by him means that you have to be him to have his love. You be who you are and discover the right of your being and have that be loved. It's a challenging thing. We're so complex.
We are.
We are
That
so.
was, one of the gifts that the Sarge gave me is that he never doubted me in anything, whether it was going to watch me play sports, supporting me in sports, or, as I grew older, this ability that I had that he didn't understand, he truly did not understand until I was in my early 40s. And it finally dawned on him one day in an interaction between he and I and a former Vietnam buddy who had passed away. He never doubted me and he never made me feel less than because I was. And in fact, I remember him. After my husband, Steve, and I were divorced, my dad used to drive with me to Chicago for book signing events. He would say, "You're not driving to Chicago by yourself. Come on, I'm going with you." And so we would have these great big long trips to Chicago. He would sit through the book signing events and always, you met my dad. He was quite a character. By the end of any book signing event, he was the highlight of the evening.
I have to say to you, I did not meet your dad.
You didn't meet my dad.
No, I did not. I did not
Darn.
meet your mother.
Well, you would have loved him because he was who he was. Hard as nails, Vietnam veteran. And on the other hand, he loved
Was he at the wedding? Was he at the wedding? Was he at the
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
then I did meet your dad. I
You
apologize.
did.
Yes. Like, wait,
Yes.
feedback. Yes, I
Yeah,
did. I
you
apologize.
did. And so when we
Yes.
take away who do we become because of our parents, my father loved children. He could not have children. And so when he did a tour of duty in Korea and in Vietnam, he would take those times off when he wasn't active, and he would literally go to orphanages. And he would bring them candies or sweets or something. And I have photographs downstairs of my dad when he was in the Air Force prior to the Army in Vietnam at an orphanage in Korea with 2 young children that he was talking to and treating them to treats. And he did that all the time. And as he got older, he volunteered in homes for people who were challenged. And he would go and play chess or checkers or whatever it happened to be. So my love of volunteering and helping other children is a direct result of the way that he brought me up to always be active in the community and always help those that needed help. I'm an example of that.
So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
What does it feel like now that he's gone to know that you were truly chosen by him?
Amazing. Absolutely. It's breathtaking. And the older I get and the more time that we have after our parents pass, that we can really take a look at who they were as human beings. Outside of their marriage to their spouse, outside of their work, outside of all of those, and you really get down to the nitty-gritty of relationship, it's pretty spectacular.
Yeah. Is that place, I want to question you here. I want to interview here because all of a sudden I feel the presence of your father in that beauty of, if we're going to be looking deeper, what is the karma between the two of you to find each other so that you're fathered?
Well, actually, I discovered that, or if it was gifted to me during my vision quest, my homlecha. And I asked the question of the spirits when I was up on the hill. I said, how is it that I became his daughter?
Mm.
And they took me back in time. I could see it very, very quickly at the border of Canada. And I was running, and I was a young girl, native, running toward the border of Canada and through the fields. And I could feel the weeds and running for every ounce of everything that I had. And in what Spirit showed me, my mother in that incarnation was shot. And in that moment of her being shot, all I saw was a blue military cuff come down and grab me and pull me up. And it was a good old Yankee. And I looked at the face, and it was my dad. It was the Sarge. And in the vision that Spirit showed me, that took me so by surprise, he looked at me and he said, I promised you I would take care of you in the next life.
Which would roll over to Dane.
Yes.
Take care of her.
Yes. So when we think about the karma that we have with our parents, it isn't always just situations from this lifetime, but we become who we are, I believe, through all time and all relationships with them. And yes, exactly, through Dane. Yes. So our parents are far more than we think they are sometimes.
Yeah.
And to your point,
always.
Yeah. You know, even having conversations with my own children about who I am.
Right. I want to honor, and I take this moment because of exactly the experience I had pre-show, and that is with Yvette. That my children and my nephew Rusty really gave me this. It's that place of, if I had children, I would not have been the person to them and be available to them because I would have been preoccupied with my children.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then some of my clients, and Yvette, I speak to you directly, is that there is this place in me as a mother that mothers the spirituality of someone,
Mm-hmm.
not the birth of their spirituality, not the birth of their physicality. And our physicality has a longevity to it that has an episode from birth to death. But our spirituality has many incarnations, many episodes, many seasons within our life.
Mm-hmm.
That it's the season to plant, the season to grow, the season to harvest, the season to be vacant, and then the season to hope again. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting how we do go through these, who am I after a season?
Right.
And who am I after an episode?
Mm-hmm.
And then what flourishes again? And so I say to Yvette, and the quality of the integrity of the spirituality of, it doesn't matter how absent I am in your life at episodes. It's important where the mothering or the nurturing or the promise is, I'm there
Mm-hmm.
when that which is needed to be touched
Mm-hmm.
by us is necessary.
Yes.
I say that to you in my own self. I say that to Lily, and I know she's there. It's that place of, it doesn't matter what happened before. We're right on time now.
Exactly.
And it's amazing how it's not an everyday thing. It's not an every week thing. But it's these things like, I mean, just recently you and I was like, well, I would have called you at 3 o'clock in the morning, but I thought I'd be polite. Wait till dawn.
Right. Yes, you did.
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Spot on.
Okay.
Spot
on. And even with Lily, to know that there are these places we can't be left out of each other's lives when our lives do not leave us out.
Mm-hmm.
And our lives are bigger than what we think they are in their everydayness.
Yeah.
Who I am after my mother and father is allowed to be who I am that chose to be born.
Yes.
Not just choose parents to give me life.
Exactly.
That may be the most profound thing I've ever said, ever.
It was spectacular. Well, in watching Dane and Elise, with the passing of my former husband, their father, Elise she just turned 25. Dane just turned 28. And it's just been over a year since their father passed on. Watching them with the gyrations of who am I now that he is no longer here. And to the point that you've been making, and Katie and Carla and Barbie, soon after Steve passed, Dane would say to me, you know, Mom, people say to me, I really look like Dad. I'm a lot like Dad. I look like Dad. I'm built like Dad, and on and on and on and so forth. And probably a month ago, he and I were talking, and he said, you know, Mom, in this past year, a lot of people have told me how much I look like Dad and I act like Dad and Dad. And he said, I love Dad. But the fact of the matter is, I look like you. I'm more like you. And I just listened to him. And he said, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. I look like you and I'm a lot like you. And I said, honey, you are you. You didn't come here to be your dad. He came here to be your dad. You came here to be born of him, but you just came here to be you. And people oftentimes out of politeness like to make comparisons in that way. But just watching how he and his Sagittarian brain muddled through all of that,
right,
to come very calmly to the conclusion that he could still love his dad and not be his dad.
Right. Right.
And a lot of people feel in becoming that they are now a man or they're now a woman because they've become their mother, they've become their father, when really, as we're talking about, we've come here to be us. And it can be very liberating once we've worked through the grief. A part of the grief can be liberating, bringing us to the fullness of who we are. And sometimes we need help. We need therapists, counselors, all of those good sorts of things. Sometimes we just need to go away for a while and be.
Right.
Lots of ways for moving through the grief.
Right. There's also lots of ways of moving toward the reality of the identity. And I think that's a very mandatory subject of being able to say, how do I associate with my own identity once my parents are gone? Because yes, there are people who want your parents to live through you.
Yes.
And so, oh, you're just like your mother. Oh, you're just like your father. And let's talk about this, because this is that deeper side also. When people would say to me, oh, you look just like your father, I was angry. I didn't want to be associated with my father for a very long time. It brought shame. I was not proud of my father for a lot of reasons. So when someone said, oh, you must be Sandra Herrick, I mean, so funny. Last time I was in California, there was issue about my sexuality. How much sex I had, how busy was I? And it was with friends. And one of my greatest friends said, well, were you a virgin when you got married? And her husband just whipped over and looked at me and was waiting for me to answer. And I looked at her and I said, my name is Sandy Herrick. And he was saying, like, well, maybe you could just shorten that to Herrick. And it was, well, yeah, I would be exerting my sexuality. I would be available to experience life.
Mm-hmm.
But it meant, it was interesting. Who am I because of a name? Who am I labeled as because of a name? My father's behavior, my mother's behavior, my behavior. Does it give me license? Does it give me shame? Does it give me leeway? You know, when my brothers used to get pulled over by the police, their name was Herrick. They got away with things. Oops.
Mm-hmm.
So who am I without these people? I can either pull away from their identity and own my own, or hide behind their identity because
Yes.
I have none of my own.
Yes. Well, and our friend Sonia is stating in the scrolling chat that she doesn't remember much of her childhood. And there are times when she feels envious of those people who can recite ad infinitum everything that happened in their childhood.
Mm.
And that's a whole subject matter in and of itself. That would be an entire show, I do believe.
Absolutely.
And sometimes it's after our parents have passed on that we begin to have glimpses of and remembrances of. And yeah, we could do a whole show about that. I'm glad that you brought that up, Sonia, because you're not the only person who has that experience of not remembering.
I think it's very important, Sonia, to also know that in my experience, because there's 7 children, I remember things from certain angles, and my siblings remember things from their angles.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't remember the same angles or the same incidences. Even as recently as last week, an associate of mine passed away. And that evening of her death, she chose to take her life in the hospice manner of she was destined to die. And God bless Santa Barbara, they honor that in hospice and say, if you know that you're dying and you can choose to go to the end or to enough. And so there was absolutely.
Wow.
It was right after the mudslides. It was, I mean, and those mudslides were right where we all were. I mean, so much of my history is right where the mudslides were within Santa Barbara. It's an astounding psyche for me to experience all this stuff. And so I called a very dear friend of ours that night, and she goes, well, I think I met you when you ordained her. And I said, I ordained her? I ordained her? So, Sonia, I want you to know, one of the most significant people in my life that became an adversary, I ordained and had no memory whatsoever. At an event so monumental, with a person so monumental in my life, that somebody else had to remind me I did something that was a pivotal point for my whole spiritual experience.
Mm-hmm.
So to not remember is not a blank or a blackout. I don't have the filler that I want to say about what it is, but it's amazing to know that we can forget significant moments for significant reasons.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful.
And somebody else will have your history.
Mm-hmm.
So don't think it's completely gone. Somebody else recorded it for you.
Thank you for that, Sandy.
Yeah, thank you.
One of the other things I wanted to touch on, and we're going to continue the series and the conversation, everyone, on becoming me. And every month when Sandy and I are together with all of you, we're going to expand upon conversation and expand upon it and roll into. But I don't think that we can leave this evening without talking about step parents. Okay. And I didn't have step parents. A lot of people do have step parents. My children have step parents. And sometimes people can feel bad for loving their step parent more than they love their biological parent, and can actually grieve more for the passing of a stepmother or a stepfather than their own biological parent, to which I say, and that's okay, because there was also an agreement to be a parent. Elise, absolutely, my kids really like Todd. Dane's a guy, so, guys are guys. Elise just loves Todd. And for Christmas, she surprised him with a coffee mug that says, "Best bonus dad ever." And he opened it up and he just sat there for a moment and the tears welled up. And she sat across on the gold couch and her eyes welled up.
Oh, I love that couch.
And later we had a conversation, Todd and I, that most likely, because of Dane and Elisa's significant others, their parents are substantially older than Todd and I. I said, "Todd, did you ever dream that you were signing up to be a parent and a grandparent? Because you'll most likely be the only grandfather that those grandchildren interact with regularly and vivaciously." And he said, "Oh my God, Dana, I never thought about that before." So what is the contract we have with our step parents? And for those of you that have had step parents that have crossed over, that you've loved, that you've adored, and vice versa, it's okay to grieve them. And in doing so, to love them. Yes, it is okay to do that. You're not being disloyal or dishonoring. You're being real about the relationship that you have with that person who has agreed to be a parent. Well, and I look at my friend Janice Francisco, Todd's mother. She and I have been friends for 20 some years. Whoever thought that she'd become Grandma Jan to my kids and my, for heaven's sakes, my mother-in-law. Relationships are so deep and they are so karmic. And we need to honor how we feel about each of the parents in our life, foster parents, whatever parent it happens to be, in an honest and open way. And if the other parent can't seem to stomach that or handle it, well, then, they have their own issues to work on. But honor those people that are your step parents and step grandparents. What do you have to say about feeling as though you're dishonoring or not giving due to those biological parents by loving step parents, Sandy?
Well, being a Scorpio, I think it is a sad angst when a step parent becomes the safer parent in some way, or a loving parent, because the angst is with the parent, the birth parent, because of the angst of the breaking up of the family or this, that, or the other thing. And there is a tragedy here when a parent manipulates a child and says, if you love someone because I'm your birth parent more than me, then you're bad. It denies the child love. Mm-hmm. It just rawly denies the child love. And then it shrinks our heart from where are you safe to love?
Exactly.
Where are you safe to love? And that type of manipulation or that type of enslavement or cruelty needs to really be looked at so that a child can love and be loved where the love is real, not bargained over.
I like
And
that.
to any of the children that are out there that wonder, am I safe to love who loves me? Not always, not always, but be brave enough to do it. Be brave enough to do it. And to all the parents that are, jealous or fearful, just be more of who you are rather than feel then you're less than who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And that will give your children the safety to love everything rather than have to choose. I hope.
Beautifully said. Judy is saying that she had 3 stepfathers that she grieved. And, a parent figure is a parent figure, and we grieve them individually and in our own way. When my ex-husband, my former husband, remarried, first thing that I said to my daughter, my little warrior woman, when she said, I'm not going to like her no matter what. You're my mom. She's not going to tell me what to do. The typical teenage Elise thing. Probably a lot of teenagers. And I looked at her and I said, Elise Marie, you will respect her until she gives you cause not to respect her. For heaven's sakes, honey, give her a chance. Give her a chance. She's a human being. And she looked at me and I said, I mean what? Yeah, exactly.
I know that look.
You do know that look. And I said, until she gives you reason, but for heaven's sakes, give her an opportunity. She's a human being doing the best that she can do. And she and I still have that conversation. And she's happy that she did give her a chance and all of,
One of the things I think we need to honor here that we haven't quite talked about is the trauma of the shift, the trauma of the loss, the post-traumatic stress of what happens when our family can't maintain family. What happens to the children? What happens to us? What is the chaos when things blow up? How do you get thrown in somebody else's choice of sexual partner that guarantees you're going to be even loved as a child? Because not all children are loved by the step parents.
That's right.
So we have to be able to know that, gee whiz, I'm the victim of sexuality. I mean, that's really the choice of my parents had sex, I come along. Yes, there's this hierarchy of spirituality that I chose my parents and everything else, but excuse me, they had sex, here I am, ta-da, and then it's a miracle that I survived all that stuff. And then if they break up and their sexuality takes them to somebody else and there's attraction, and then I'm victim to, well, they like each other, but what about me? Mm-hmm. So in order to be able to be deeper about this, there's that place of the romanticism of it is one thing. The reality of it is something else. And to be able to talk about the dignity of if we choose to change our lives, are we choosing to be respectful to all the lives that are changing because of our choices? It's unfathomable to realize how much we have to think to make certain everybody is respected, loved, and honored. And what we have to look at is to not feel that you're threatened if what happens when you're not liked by the step parent? What's happened when you're not liked by the stepchild? How do you maintain the dignity of, I know your life didn't work out out there, but I'm not your enemy, or I am your enemy because you mean something else. I mean, all that. So you're, Elise and Dane are very lucky in having Todd, in having Steve's wife, in having something say, we support you, but not everybody's given that generosity.
Right.
So what I say to that is, how then do you find your own sanity and your peer group to come out and take care of? You've already lost your mother and father, and you've lost your father to your stepmother or to your stepfather. You know, those griefs are important aspects also. Not everything is as serendipitous, and not everybody has your intelligence to offer to your children, or your children's intelligence to offer to the step-parents. That's profound also.
It is. It is. Sounds like a topic for our next show.
Okie dokie.
But this evening, in wrapping up, who are we after the death of a parent or both parents? I've had people say to me that after losing mom and dad both, they feel orphaned in the beginning. And then they begin to feel empowered to become themselves, unencumbered by, but what will my parents think? What would you say to that, Sandy? You've lost both of your parents. What is it like for you compared to having lost your dad, but mom was still around?
When I lost my father, see, I have to be very blunt and very honest. When I lost my father, the illusion of my mother and father was shattered, because my mother and my father no longer were the prominent fight that I had to exist under in my life. And so when my mother and father lost their relationship in his death, something happened in my blindness, in my denial, that saw something in my mother. Or my mother morphed. Our family morphed. And who I became, I will not say it was an orphan. It was almost like an alien to my own family. Mm-hmm. I was no longer an ally to the family. I was an ally to my sight of the honesty of the corruption in my family and the desire to have some honesty in my family. Whoa. So I became the second child that saw a lot of history and knew, boy, I'm having a reaction, that I had to become me rather than just their child. And I had to see that my mother was my mother, my father was my father, my brothers and sisters are my brothers and sisters, and to give up the idea of the ideal. And to step way back into, I'm going to be very blunt, I almost was like thrown from the orbit of my family. And as I'm reeling back, it's when I had my breakdown. It's when I went to see our Tucson. It's when I lost my incredible fortune. It's when I lost the fortune of the fortunateness of many, many things that, thank God, because here I am today, but it ripped from me the idea of who I had to become to be seen as better than my mother's idea of what my father was. Listen to the archives of this, because I just said something so profound, because I was supposed to outgrow my father's failures. and satisfy my mother and take care of her. That was my dream, and I did. And then in that, my mother and I became lethal enemies. So the need for me to come out of my idea, of my fantasy, that's not fair. To come to the reality of something deeper in my mother. And this is not to take her down or make her wrong, because her trauma is hers. It was to see karma in another way that allowed me even to be more of who I am by not just being what my mother needed me to be. I became what my mother needed me to be, to such a degree that I gave her everything. But that was still not me. And in that moment my father died. It's like his karma and her karma ripped that out of me and said, Sandy, you're going to be who you are, not what anybody needs you to be.
So Sandy, in that and after that, you come from a large family. Some of our viewers tonight, our friends listening, come from large families. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes when both parents have passed, the relationship between siblings changes. And the Christmases that were all about gathering at mom's or mom and dad's or dad's, all of a sudden everybody's like, well, you're on your own for Christmas because I only did that for mom. I only did that for dad. I really never wanted to spend Christmas with you. Or I only want to spend Christmas with them and not you.
We're never going to stop talking if you keep going on like this. Yeah.
So that's also a consideration in becoming me. Who are you when you're no longer having the family Christmas or the family bar mitzvah or whatever it happens to be, because all of a sudden all of the siblings are cut loose to celebrate or to be in their own way. Right. Outside of, well, we need to do that for mom and dad because mom and dad expect us to do that every year.
Right.
That's reality. And so there can be also a mourning of,
yeah,
we're no longer getting together every year for whatever, because they're no longer here. So it's a time to start new traditions.
Yes. So being excluded from the tradition that was a obligatory tradition, or obligatory tradition to make it look like you were bonded.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden you find out you're not bonded. Or somebody in the bond says, you ain't bonded no more. I'm now in charge of the bond. It's a factor of growing up that challenges the idea, wow, the idea of what goodness is. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The idea of goodness is the family stays together. The idea of goodness is, as a family, we're supposed to be together. The idea is of, if we're family, we're supposed to love each other. And that is a horrific myth that gets us all into trouble if it's not real in the family that we're bonded to. And if we have a need to be loved by a family that doesn't necessarily always love us, we're the ones who will go down in flames. And that family that doesn't really care about us will watch us burn and go, all gone. And
Ellie Spencer is just saying this needs a part 2. So I guess, Cal, we will begin where we are leaving off this evening with just that very thing, so.
What happens if family says, get out of here?
Exactly. The perfect family, fact or fiction.
Yeah. What I just want to say before we wrap up is that, we're so intense. Families are so intense. And part of the tragedy of the family is that when we have what mother would do that? Well, what father would do that? Well, what family would do that? Well, what? Well, a lot of family does it to us, and we're in shock if it happens to us, thinking it doesn't happen to anybody else. It happens all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And this is one of those things, is how do we get real in the moment rather than grieve the fact that what we want to have real doesn't exist. That's growing up.
That's growing up. And with that, Sandy, I think that, that's a wrap for this evening. And, the beginning of the next edition of looking deeper into fact and fiction and family. And who do we become when the family gets real or gets lost or
just lives.
Here's your hat. What's your hurry?
Yeah.
So, everybody is saying that they vote for a part 2.
Okay.
For this show.
Continue? Oh, thank you. Hey, Carl and Joe. Mwah. Perfect.
Yeah. With that, everyone, thank you for being with Sandy and I tonight for our inaugural 10th season, our 10th year together, and now looking deeper. Sandy, happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary to another 10 years, my love.
To another 10 years. Oh, my goodness. Thank you all for joining us. And some of you have been with us these past 10 years. Some of you are new. We love you all. Blessings be, everyone. Have a beautiful evening.
Take care. Bye-bye.